بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا، اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك آمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله مولانا. How's مولانا?
Good, alhamdulillah. Sorry, I got a bit delayed in the first year. We had a Q&A, alhamdulillah. Just dealing with some questions. Yeah, normally there are certain questions that all first year students ask. What's a normal first year questions? Tell me. What's a normal first year questions? No, not grammar questions. I'm talking about Islam questions. Anybody? What do you think the first year normally asks? No one has any thoughts.
We passed that stage, alhamdulillah مولانا. Alhamdulillah, we're out of the jahiliyyah now. Alhamdulillah.
The most common first year questions are always around Sunnah and Bid'ah. Around can we make khadat, can we make 7 days, 40 days, can we make a khatam for someone who passed away. Most first year questions are around Sunnah and Bid'ah. I'm not saying you don't have the questions, but I'm just saying, like, when you start out, that's like the most confusing things. Like, why do we have all the different opinions, and why are some people doing this? It's like a minefield. But like after a while, things kind of make sense. I don't know. After time. Good. Alhamdulillah. But you guys all sorted out there? Are you sorted out? You did all your first questions last year. But last year I didn't have much Q&A. This year I'm having a bit more Q&A now and then.
Well, my first question is how many years is it going to take before we can understand the Quran? Like when we read it. So that's
Yeah, it depends. It depends. If you study a surah now for the next 2 or 3 weeks, you'll be able to understand when you read it.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
like unseen content.
It's difficult to understand unseen content because you won't know the vocab.
True.
You know what I mean? So basically, whatever, if it's unseen content, you understand that which you covered before. Like, you know, but if you haven't seen, for example, tarhaquha qatara, you know what I mean? You might because of certain words. So in other words, there's no like point to where you understand everything. Even myself, I will come to something like, you know, I can't remember what this word means because it only comes maybe in the surah once in the whole Quran. Then I must go check it up again. So in other words, the idea also for me why I keep telling you to memorize the surah is because when you, like, for example, now we're doing our third surah now, Naba, Nazi'at and Abasa. If you memorize this, then you almost would have memorized all the vocab and the meanings. That's
Yes,
because you have memorized every single word. And then you know these three surahs. And whenever these words come in another, for example, min ay shay'in khalaqa, you know, if it ever comes again, then it'll be easy for you to understand.
I think the important thing is also memorizing the words, because sometimes you have the sort of the translation and what we've done in class in the back of your mind, and you also have the memorization, but you can't link the two. I'm finding that part hard.
Yes,
what we're doing in class and the memorization, and then especially if you recite it in your salah and you recite it like a normal cadence or pace, then you don't have enough time to link the Arabic words with the translation.
Yeah, I think the issue is that the stuff that you memorize before you studied Arabic is actually harder to understand sometimes because you like on autopilot. But if you almost learn with understanding, it's like a different type of experience. Because yeah, just like even if you say Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad, like walam yakul lahu, like what's happening there? Walam yakul lahu.
Yeah, I think previously it was just a batch of sounds, maybe. I don't know how to put it. But now you can sort of, you're supposed to separate it into the words, because that's a few words there that Maulana just recited.
Yes.
Whereas before Mizan, you didn't know that was many words. You just took it as a batch.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that until you study the surah properly, and then it's still difficult to know it, even if it's like common surah. And even if you know walam yakul lahu, it's difficult because it's actually walam yakun lahu. And okay, that's actually a very difficult verse to understand. But I think in summary, basically, there isn't a specific time. It's a continuous journey, and if you want to move fast on the journey, is the work that you are doing, you have to revise it. That's basically it. The work that you are doing, you have to revise and go over it. And we should sometimes I think we should have testing in class, but testing also a lot of people feel uncomfortable with it. But maybe it's something we should consider. Give you a test.
So two-minded about that, I guess.
Yeah. That was when I will leave it inshallah. Someone mentioned in the chat here that Sister Jawaya said she was contemplating going back to second year. Sister Jawaya, this is second year again now. For those of you who want to refresh, Maulana Zakaria is reteaching the foundations of Nahu of second year. So if you're in Dawrah year and you feel like you had some gaps, you can basically revisit that. He's only doing the marfu'at, which is the fa'il, na'ibul fa'il, mubtada, khabar, ism kana, khabar inna. He's doing those 6 things. So if you want to revision on that, Maulana Zakaria is teaching it again. So you can even just get the videos on that again, and then you can just watch it again. But let's keep going, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Maulana. Can I just quickly make a comment in public?
Bismillah.
What I find challenging, I was second year last year. So from last year already, we had to join up with a third year class. So what I found challenging from last year up until this year is that there's so many vocab rules that's been discussed that I'm not familiar with, because we didn't do those lessons since last year. We stopped at a certain point. I think Maulana did up to page 21 and 22 or something, and we never continued. So there's so many lessons that I'm not familiar with. So it's actually very challenging to grasp when it's being discussed and we didn't have the full lesson.
Yes. So Yumna, I'm completely guilty of that. So I think the problem is I only stopped the textbook up until page 21. I think it was the marfu'at. So basically, what's happening now is Maulana Zakaria is teaching those 21 pages again, and when he's done, we'll teach his whole class the rest of it.
Okay, shukran, that will be great. Shukran so much. And it's
so basically,
I'm using my daughter's tab. It's Amina.
Oh, okay. So Amina. Yes. So I am aware of that. So basically, I asked Maulana Zakaria to teach that same part that you did last year, and then we can collectively carry on as a joint class, going, because even some of the third and fourth years haven't covered all of those NASP and Jara things yet. So definitely it is a bit of a gap that we have to cover, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay. So Tawheeda said that the shocking was the concept of ikhtilaf. What do you mean that it was a no-go area?
I thought everybody is agreeing.
What do you mean everyone's agreeing? Like in Cape Town, no one agrees on anything. Well, people don't agree on anything in Cape Town, man. Not in Cape Town, in the whole Muslim world. Muslims find like random things to fight about. Now they're fighting about the vaccine now. I mean, like if you think about, like, like we fight about the moon, Maki, Mooni, we fight about like just like not everything, but a lot of things Muslims like fight about. Like you would think they wouldn't fight about it, but now of all the things to fight about, they fight about vaccine. So like it's like a medical issue, but now like scholars are debating it. It's like crazy. Just for me, it's like mind blowing. Anyway, what I'm saying is it's mind blowing that we have such ikhtilaf about something which is actually a medical issue. Anyway, let's bismillah. Let's leave the vaccines for now. Maulana Irshad had a good program yesterday on Islam Academy. It's on his YouTube page, inshallah. It's good to watch it, inshallah, on Isnad Academy and Maulana Muhammad's page. And on Maulana Muhammad Maulana Irshad's page. Okay, Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Then we came to verse number 33, and the verse number 33 is the beginning of a new part, because in the previous part Allah spoke about the signs of creation. من أي شيء خلق من نطفة خلقه فقدر ثم سبيل يسر ثم أماته فأقبر ثم إذا شاء أنشره, and that's going to be the whole life of human beings. كلا لما يقضي ما أمره. Then Allah says, look towards your food and the process of the creation of your food. فلينظر الإنسان إلى طعامه أن صببنا الماء صبا ثم شققنا الأرض شقا فأنبتنا فيها حبا وعنبا وقضبا وزيتونا ونخلا وحدائق غلبا وفاكهة وأبا متاعا لكم ولأنعامكم. I'll speak about all the different types of fruits and provisions for people as a sign of His creative ability. Then Allah goes, in this verse, Allah moves the focus from this world, from science in this dunya, and Allah moves the focus to the year after, and Allah says, فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الصَّاخَّةُ. What does فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الصَّاخَّةُ mean? What does فَإِذَا mean? What does فَإِذَا mean?
So when?
When in the past or in the future?
Future.
In the future. So فَإِذَا. So in the, and again the fa there is going to be, what do you think the fa is going to be for? Ta'qib or tafri'? So remember, ta'qib means this, then this. Tafri' means not consequence, but basically branching out from the previous discussion. Branching out from the previous discussion. Brother Rashad?
Ta'qib, the sequence of that. So when?
Ta'qib on what? Ta'qib must be like a list
chance
of
to get
things.
it right.
Okay, so it will be more tafri'. Tafri' means branching out from the previous discussion. In other words, قُتِلَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا أَكْفَرَهُ. How disbelieving is mankind? Has he not seen the signs of himself? Has he not seen the signs of his food? Fa. So branching out from that, just wait. Fa. Then, so, either, when, ja'at, past or present? Past or present?
It's past, Maulana.
Fi'l madi, past. Good. But you're speaking about the past or the future?
We are speaking about the future, but however, obviously, I don't know if this is the correct understanding, but one would think that this is a moment that has been predestined already. It's like already in the qadr of Allah that this is going to happen. So it's like, I don't know.
Good. So it's basically as certain as if it's a done deal. So in other words, it's as certain, as sure as if it's happened already. Because it's happened in the qadr of Allah Ta'ala, and it'll just manifest that Allah has decreed it.
Good. Is there a term for that? Is there a term for that? Because it seems to happen a lot. It's like a recurring theme or linguistic device.
Yes. So this is recurring. I'm just trying to think of what the Arabic would be. I don't know if it's like فعل ماضي للتوكيد وتحقيق. I must look up for the official term, inshallah. I'll look for the official term, inshallah. فإذا جاءت الصاخة. Next one is going to be, so branching out of the previous discussion, out of people's rejection, out of people's not being able to see the signs, then either just like almost like wait until either when the time comes, when in the future ja'at will come something which is so sure. Allah is using the maldi as if it happens already. What will come? The fa'il as-sakha. What does sakha mean?
Deafening
like
blast.
a loud, deafening blast, loud sound that pierces the ears.
A loud, deafening sound, a loud blast. Which blast do we think it is referring to?
The trumpet?
The blowing of the most common opinion would be the blowing of the horn, because why? The next verse is speaking about the resurrection, what happens after resurrection. So it could be the blowing of the horn, and specifically even just the second blowing of the horn, because that's the blowing of resurrection. Some ulama might also add it could also refer to the sound of the destruction of the universe. in addition to the blowing of the horn. Meaning what? Like, for example, what will happen to the mountains?
Get blown
What
like
happens to the
cotton.
mountain? So if a mountain must perish, that's a huge event. Like for mountain, like entire mountain ranges to perish and to become dust, and for the skies to split open. These are huge events, and these huge events will also be accompanied by the sound of that event. There's like a huge just explosions happening everywhere. So it's a sakha. What terms Allah used in the previous verse, the previous surah? فَإِذَا جَاءَتْ what?
Tom.
What does tama mean again? Ron checking your notes quickly. She's paging back now.
Yes, overwhelming calamity. That's exactly what I did want to know.
No. So how we saw her different. Tama is something which surrounds you, which overwhelms you, which comes from all sides. Where Saha is specifically linked to a sound. What about the previous surah? Does overwhelming surrounding fit better? And why does Saha sound fit better in the surah? There's something happened in the previous surah that overwhelming is very suitable for it. I'll give you a clue. هل أتاك حديث موسى? At the end, نكال الآخرة والأولى. Come on, where's someone? هل أتاك حديث موسى اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى.
Way
What is the end of
down.
Fir'aun? What is the end of
Way-
Fir'aun?
Way
Oh,
down.
he was
with the water.
overwhelmed in the sea.
Yes.
He
the
was
sea.
overwhelmed. Fir'aun was overwhelmed in the sea. He was surrounded. He was overwhelmed. The sea came from all sides. He completely enveloped him, closed him, drowned him. So what goes better with that? فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الطَّامَّةُ الْكُبْرَى. When that overwhelming, surrounding, overpowering event comes. This surah here. عَبَسَ وَتَوَلَّى أَنْ جَاءَهُ الْأَعْمَى. What is the whole discussion about here? أما من استغنى فأنت له تصدى وما عليك ألا يزكى. In the previous one,
They
that
don't
was
wanna
with
hear.
Fir'aun. People
Yeah,
don't want to
they
listen.
don't want to hear. They don't want to
They
listen.
don't want to hear.
That's right.
They don't want to listen to the message of guidance. They don't want to listen to the message of guidance. فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الصَّاخَّةُ. So if you don't want to listen, it's going to become something so overpowering, deafening. It's going to shake up and destroy this entire world and resurrect all of humanity. So in other words, this surah here is more about the hearing, the sakha, abasa, abasa, sami'a, sakha. You can just keep those two together. It goes together. Brother Ziad?
Assalamu alaikum, Maulana.
No,
Just
okay.
perhaps on that word, I overheard, or maybe some ishara on this ayah. I mean, I overheard once talk about, how on that day, then the oceans will be ablaze, and somebody made a analogy to one way we can think about it is if hydrogen, which is the hydrogen molecules within water, if you split that, you're basically thinking about something on the level of atomic bomb or something on that. I mean, just we're not speaking about loud noises and explosions.
Yes. I mean, this would probably surpass any atomic bomb or any atomic. You know what I mean? Because it's the destruction of the entire world, and that could be some sort of like scientific explanation. The only thing about scientific explanations is that I don't like to. It's good to discuss it, but I don't tie it directly as a tafsir for it. I say it's a possible like thought to have about it, because sometimes that discussion sometimes almost becomes like the dominant opinion just because we like to like rest things, or we like to locate things within contemporary science. So the issue with that is that the science keeps changing, and you don't want to kind of rest your interpretation in something which is often moving, if that makes sense. So those kind of things are possibilities, and someone can mention it, but we won't say that like Sakha refers to hydrogen molecule splitting. You with me? Because then it becomes problematic, because how do we arrive at that tafsir? So So yeah, so those things we can mention, but I would caution to say like it's the tafsir of Sakha. It is a thought we could have, an interesting thought we could have, but in general we could think about the destruction of the earth in terms of how it gets destroyed. Then Allah says, يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ. Yawma, what is Yawma?
On that
Day,
day.
on that day.
Why is it Nasbun?
Zaman.
It's a dharf, and again now maybe those of you who haven't done it before will feel unsettled now, but it's basically a preposition of time, and this will be nasb. In other words, it is telling you what time is the saha. It is the time of Yawma. It is the time of Yawma, and the Yawma there, you can see it's light. Normally the mudaf ilayh is ism, but sometimes a fi'l, not sometimes, oftentimes a verb can act as the mudaf ilayh. So Yawma would be the day that. So now it will be a definite day, because almost like the yafirru, farra yafirru is going to be a verb, but it's going to be act like a mudaf ilayh. So the saha is the day that yafirru. Farra yafirru means to what?
Flee.
Means to flee, means to run away, to flee, to abandon. Yawma yafirru will flee al-mar'u. These are like very heavy words. These, like if you think about how much you love these people, like it's unbelievable to think about it. Yafirru al-mar'u. A mar'u means a person. A mar'u means a person. A mar'u, yeah. Mar'u means a person. A female is an imra'a, but a mar'u is a person. Generally a male, but it will include the female as well. And like the muru'a means someone's pride and honor. So it's similar root letters. So a person will flee min from akhihi. What's akhihi?
His brother.
His brother. So in if you think about Qiyamah, why would someone flee from someone else? Is fleeing the same as being oblivious? You understand? Because it's different to say that a person will be oblivious, a person will be detached, a person will not be concerned with their brother. But Allah didn't say it. Allah said the person will flee, will run away from their brother. So in what context will someone flee from someone else?
Well, does this potentially relate to when everyone is being judged and your rights have been taken by another person, or you have taken your rights, and that hisab must be made, and you run away from people because you don't want to have to deal with that account?
Okay, so I mean the answer on the right track, because you see what happens is that there has to be something happening in the relationship to make people flee from each other. Because if you're just worried about yourself, it doesn't mean that you're fleeing from someone else. Because flee literally means like you're like a runaway. But if you're worried about yourself, doesn't mean you're gonna run away. It can just mean you can take care of yourself. So that could be one opinion, maybe, that you don't want the account to be taken. What else?
Fear,
Can it
Molan.
maybe be,
Okay, Sister Wasima and then Brother Susan.
can it be that you're more worried about yourself?
Yes, you are worried about yourself, but why would you flee then? Why don't you just be still?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, good. Brother Sunir?
I think it's you lose all sense of rationality due to fear. It's almost like when we saw what these riots a month or so ago, when there is maybe a police officer that fires a weapon into the air, everyone just disperses. There's no thought process in terms of where to run. You just disperse. So it's almost like the fear makes you lose all sense of rationality, and you just the fear of your it's flight or fright, and you just immediately just go in whatever direction that takes you.
Yes. Okay, so that could also be in terms of just like chaos of the day, when Allah says "Kal-farashil mabthuth," like moths who are scattered and just flying around. That could be one as well. But Ziad?
Is it perhaps just building on what Brother Sunir said? Is it perhaps you don't want to be afflicted perhaps with any affliction that might affect somebody else? So to isolate yourself as much as possible from whatever might occur to them.
Good. So brothers, yeah, that's actually one I read in the tafsir, is that in this case, the akhi is the one who is receiving the punishment. You with me? And because remember, this is a Makkan surah. The Makkan people are all related. Well, not all, but they're mostly related. They're from one tribe. So they're cousins and their brothers and so on. So the time that you flee from someone is when something terrible happens to someone and you next in line. So when you next in line, you basically just you run as far as you can from it because you're going to be next in line. So in other words, there's an ishara to the Makkan people that even though you are family and you are together and you find strength in that, when one of you receives the punishment, the other one's going to break that bond and break that tie and run as far away as they can. So that's going to be an opinion, but I think the opinion of Sunir also is a good reflection as well in terms of just also the idea of chaos, because there's many hadith and ayat will also speak about that idea of chaos and terror, when even like the pregnant woman will drop a load and so on. That comes in the Quran as well. So also that idea of that overwhelming fear, but also this idea of as people receive their hisab and as they enter into the hellfire, other people are going to feel more fearful, and they're going to even want to flee away from those people that were dear to them. And then Allah starts off with akhi, and then Allah gets to the more dear people, wa ummihi wa abi. So an akh generally wouldn't be as close as your and your ab. Wa ummihi wa abihi. And the next person, and this person's mother and this person's father. The next one Allah says, wa sahibatihi wa bani. What's a sahiba? A sahiba could be a spouse, but a spouse, but a sahiba is also someone who you spend time with, someone that you are close to. So a sahiba, in a sense, the word is closer than zawj. Well, what is zawj?
What?
A zawj is a
spouse or partner.
A zawj someone you're married to. But is your zawj also always your sahiba?
No.
Maybe not if it's a multiple, in the Arab society, if you had maybe multiple marriage partners, you might have a sahiba.
In a polygamous society, it might not be someone who's very close to you, or even in a monogamous marriage, your zawj cannot be, maybe not your sahiba, could be someone that you are close to, that you share your life with. So the sahiba there is yes, is indicating towards someone's husband or wife, but it's also indicating to someone's husband or wife where there is a tight connection. Because if it would be zawj, not all zawjs are close. So then I wouldn't have the same, like some of you, not some people, so some people that wouldn't like carry as much warning as a sahiba.
Maulana, can it relate us to understand companionship, the level of the relationship and intensified relationship like the Sahabas, and then the other group of Sahabas that went out into the Battle of Badr, where Rasul Sallam had a very, very tight and special relationship there. So it means we will find in life that we do have such relationships with people where we call them my Sahabati or my Habibati, for example.
Yes, for example, yes. So a sahiba is specifically someone's, like a husband's wife, but it's only a husband's wife where they have that close, tight bond, where they have that intimate, tight bond. And therefore the word sahibatihi is used. And then the final one is bani. Bani is his children. Bani is his children. And if you think about the sequence of things, to most people, your children are the closest to you. in heart, your children are closer to you than often than to your parents are to you, than your spouse is to you. Normally, your children are the closest to you in terms of intimate relationships. So Allah is saying that on that day, the terror is so overwhelming that if out of the terror, people will flee from each other, and also if any of them receives punishment, everybody else will flee from them as well. Why? لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ شَأْنٌ يُغْنِي. لِكُلِّ means for every. Imri'in means what? Imri'in is a
Man
person.
among them.
Every man or every person. Minhum, from amongst them. لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ, for every person from amongst them. يَوْمَئِذٍ. يَوْمَئِذٍ means on that day. في ذلك اليوم, on that day. For every person on that day, they will have a sha'an. A sha'an, there's going to be the mutara mu'akhar. They will have a sha'an. What's a sha'an?
Concern and respect.
So a sha'an generally is going to refer to a very grave, serious matter, or a something of weight. So they're going to have a concern, a very weighty concern, a very grave matter. And what is that grave matter, that grave concern?
What will be their outcome?
They will be completely consumed about their own outcome. And that outcome, sha'an, what is the sha'an going to do? It's going to yughnihi. Yughnihi. What are the root words of yughni, and where does it come from? Which verb?
Fourth verb?
Fourth verb, good. And what's the root letters?
Is it ghana, Maulana?
From the ghana, which means to be what?
To be free from need, or is it to be independent?
Free. And did the word come before in the surah?
Yes,
I'm not
relating
sure.
to the Quraysh leaders that I think thought that they were
Verse number 5. Amma man istaghna. Can you see the link here? Amma, as for the one that istaghna, who deems himself to be free and independent of your guidance. Allah is saying here, on that day, every person from amongst them, on that day, they will have a sha'an, they will have a concern, they will have a preoccupation, and that preoccupation, concern about the year after, it will cause something. And it will cause what? It will yughnihi. It will make them free of, or that sha'an that will make that person free. The sha'an will make that person free. Free of what? Free of any ability to have concern for someone else. Free of any concern, ability to have concern of anybody else. And does it remind you of a hadith? When they go to each Nabi, what does the Prophet say? They go to Nabi Ibrahim, they go to Nabi Musa, they go to Nabi Isa. What does each one say?
Nafsi, nafsi.
Nafsi, nafsi. Even some of the Anbiya, they sha'an on their days that they are only saying nafsi, nafsi. Except our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who says ummati, ummati. So for ordinary people, imagine this is the Anbiya. For ordinary people, لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ, for every person minhum from amongst them, on the day, they will have a matter, a sha'an, yughni, and the word ghaniya, I think it is, or ghaniya, that word means to be independent, to be free. Aghna yughni means that the sha'an will make this person independent and free of any ability to have concern for anybody else. Okay, so that's going to be the about the year after. May Allah Ta'ala protect us on that day. It's a day of great terror, and it's a day that that with so many people passing. I went to Janazah yesterday again. With so many people passing away, we're putting so many people in the grave. It is also time for us to also reflect that one day we will be the one put under the ground as well, and we will also be raised, and we will be faced with these same situations. And So sometimes in our lesson we reflect on the, let's call it like the technical analysis of the verses and the tafsir of it, but also the ma'ana, the meaning of it also needs contemplation in our own times and spaces and lives, that we have to also contemplate the meanings of it, um, aside from the analysis of it. And the analysis is there to deepen our contemplation of the meanings. لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ شَأْنٌ يُغْنِيهِ. Then Allah says, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ مُسْفِرَةٌ. Like if I had to analyze all of that there, then all of this, when you use the word when in Arabic, either, how do you normally use when in the language? When something's going to happen, how do you use when?
When you refer to the future.
Okay, so for example, I say, when I graduate, what am I waiting for?
For the graduation.
So, but I'm saying, like, say someone says to you, Assalamu alaikum, when I graduate. Is that complete?
Oh, no.
What is going to happen when that thing arrives? When it
Okay,
comes
so
to
when is often going to be like conditional sentence.
Yeah.
So either is going to be a often like conditional. So when I look at this sentence here, either, the sentence starts here, either. But when I go to yawma, can you see yawma is just a continuation of the either. The yawma is not the response to either. Like when, like either is normally like a when then. When this happens, then something's going to happen. So in other words, فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الصَّاخَّةُ, when that blast occurs, it will be on the day that people will flee from each other and people will be preoccupied by their own conditions. And then the wujuh here is actually the response to the either. You with me? The wujuh is the outcome. Because the wujuh is going to speak about two groups of people, those who are successful and those who are unsuccessful. Do you with me? So when this event comes, and this event will be accompanied by this great terror of people being preoccupied by themselves and people fleeing from the most beloved, when that happens, what is going to happen? Wujuhun yawma idhin musfira. Wujuhun means what?
A plural of face. Faces.
Face. So faces. Yawma idhin means what? Which did now? Here's another yawma idhin here.
On that day.
Faces on that day will be musfira. What does musfira mean?
Bright or shining.
It will be bright or shining, to be glowing, bright or shining. What does this word mean on the first bab? We did it before in this class.
To travel?
To travel. Yeah.
Not in the first bab. Second bab is travel. Safra, Yusuf, second bab is
To
travel.
scribe. To write.
Not on the first bab. I don't think scribe, right?
Unveil?
I'm trying to remember. We did the word. Safir was a scribe, and then we did this now recently.
Yes, somebody mentioned it now, Maulana, to uncover or unveil.
To uncover or unveil.
Good. So safara on the first bab means to uncover, to veil, to remove something. And therefore traveling means when you unveil places, and when you write also you unveil meanings. So Allah is saying, so when I'm saying, when you think about the word, faces are going to be radiant bright, what's the connection between that and uncovering?
Maybe people will see their nur that's this of the ruh.
Okay. But I'm speaking about the person themselves. There's an uncovering of themselves, and then there's radiance. What is being uncovered?
Their knowledge of being good. Yeah.
So in other words, it's almost like, let's say, like in this world, can you see who is going to be of which category in this world?
Milana, it's
look at
almost like
someone.
when a person's blindfolded, like, you know, you're surprising them with something, and then you remove the blindfold, and then they actually see what's in front of them. Could it be that in
Okay.
that sense, that from almost like a state of ignorance to knowledge, by removing that blindfold, you're able to see now the reality.
Yeah,
Okay,
so they can
but
see the
these
outcome.
but these people here whose faces are going to be brightened, are they the believers or disbelievers?
The believers.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. In this world, can you see who's a believer by looking at their face?
No.
No, in other words, in this world, people's faces you can't see who has a face of success and a face of distress in the next world. You can't see it. So in other words, almost like as if, and also people often in this world who are believers often carry a great amount of distress. They may be from the oppressed, they may be from those like the Prophet ﷺ who was laysa lahu raha. He never had any rest. He was always daimu, what they say about the Prophet ﷺ, he was daimul fikr. He was always thinking about the ummah. In other words, he was preoccupied with the state of the ummah. So in other words, on that day, there's almost like an uncovering of, let's call it the normality of people's face. Like almost like people's faces are actually a veil to their true state. And when the year after comes, the material apparent veils are lifted and reality is shown. So the musfira is actually like the uncovering of someone's physical veil, and you can almost like see their spiritual light.
Milana, it's almost like in here, Allah is the only one that knows whether the person has iman or not. But
Yes,
on
yes.
that day, it will be clear, everyone will be able to clearly distinguish and will be able to see.
Yes, and there are many narrations about that, so it means manifest. The manifestation of people's face, of people's faith, will be apparent. Like in this world, people's faith is something concealed. Someone may have the words of faith but not have the reality of faith, or someone may not have the words of faith but may have the reality of faith. We don't know people's actual states. Therefore, even sometimes for me, when non-Muslims die, I would never ever say anything about non-Muslims' fate, a specific individual. I can only speak about what Allah says about belief and the criteria and so on. But you can never, for me, apply a judgment to someone who has passed away in this world, because only Allah knows who has fulfilled the actual criteria of the faith that He has stated. So on that day, they're going to have faces, and then on that face is going to be musfira. There's going to be an unveiling, and the unveiling is going to be manifest on people's faces through a radiance and through a light. And may Allah make us of those. Allahu Ameen. And those faces, and when Allah means face, Allah means beings. Again, this is the idea of dhikrul ba'di wa iradatul kull. Dhikrul ba'di, dhikr, the mention of al-ba'd, of some, wa, and irada, the intent of al-kull, of the whole thing. Meaning what? The entire beings will be illuminated. We're not only referring to their face, but the face is obviously going to be the central component. Dahikatun mustabshira. Again, wujuhun is the mubtada. Yawma idin is just a preposition of time. What is the khabar for the mubtada? What will be the faces be? There will be musfira. That's be the khabar number 1. Then khabar number 2 and khabar number 3. Khabar number 2, there will be dahikatun. Khabar number 3, there will be mustabshira. These are all 3 khabars for the faces. So dahika means what?
Laughing. Dahika is
Dahika means laughing. It's beyond smiling. A smile is ibtisam, tabassum. But the dahika means a laugh. A laugh means someone who is joyous, who is happy. Dahikatun. Mustabshira. What's mustabshira?
Rejoiceful.
Rejoiceful. Prophet is always described as this. You say daimul bishr. He was always someone who had bishar. Bishar means he always had, he never concealed his joy from people. That when he used to greet people, interact with people, he always had a sense of bishar. It's part of the sunnah is to be happy to meet people. And even that if you not feel happy, if you don't feel happy inside, you have to make yourself appear happy to meet people, because this is like the warmth of receiving your guest. Like imagine like you receive a guest and say, "Assalamu alaikum, I'm having such a headache. Come inside." Like you can't like imagine when meet someone like that. People will be okay. No, don't worry, I'll come some other time. Like you don't meet a guest like that. Like even if you have a headache and you're feeling well, you say, "Mashallah, come inside. It's great to see you." You have bishra when you see people. So mustabishra is this idea of having happiness, but the istabshara yastabshara is on the 10th bab, and also besides the 10th bab being for seeking and for deeming, the 10th bab can also be a mubalagha form. Mubalagha mean an exaggerated form, an intense form, meaning that the people have intense joy, intense happiness. They will be laughing and they'll be intensely happy. So the mustabshara on the 10th bab is actually an intense form of happiness. Next, Allah says,
this related to the hearing of the good news, particularly.
yes. So this is related to people. I mean, there is no better news you'll ever hear than the news that you're going to paradise. There's no other news that will ever come close to that. The fact that you are going to enter paradise is like the biggest news that people will receive, and then they will be completely illuminated. They will be in complete utter joy. ضاحكة مستبشرة. They will be laughing. They'll be completely joyous that I am now, alhamdulillah, going to enter paradise. Allah grant us that moment. Allahu Amin. Despite all our shortcomings, Allah grant us those moments. That news. On the other side, Allah says, وَهُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَلَيْهَا غَبَرَةٌ. And. So in other words, it's going to be the idha is the when, and the huju here is going to be the first condition. It's condition number one. Or like consequence one. When, then. When this happens, faces will be brightened. When this happens, faces on that day, wujuhun faces yawmaidin on that day, alayha, upon it, over it will be ghabara. What's ghabara?
Dust.
Ghabara means dust. Dust. In other words, there will be a covering on those faces. They'll be soiled with dust. Tarhaquha qatara. What's the meaning of tarhaquha?
Maulana, is there a specific reason why ghabara? I mean, I would think also because the way it sounds, it's also harsh, because also turab is also could mean dust. Is it maybe a discussion as to why Allah chose ghabara instead?
I'll have to look it up. In the tafsir I read, I didn't see any specific reasons why ghabara as opposed to the turab, but I think that's the kind of words that you look up in the well, they call it tafriqul lugha. Tafriqul lugha means where you basically have books that differentiate between synonyms. So I will look it up, inshallah. They're only available in Arabic, they're not really available in English. But I don't know if anybody else read anything or anything about why ghabara as opposed to turab and why dust. I didn't read why dust specifically. Okay. So it's something to do. Tarhaquha. What tarhaquha mean? Taraqa means what?
Cover them.
To cover. And the ha goes back to what? What does the ha go back to?
Faces. The faces of
the ha goes back to faces. So the face is a plural of non-human thing. So we'll cover the faces. The faces. We'll cover the faces. Qatara. What's qatara?
Darkness.
Qatara is sorry, there's darkness, but qatara also means something which is linked to smoke as well. So qatara would often be where people cover themselves in smoke. So for example, when you hunt and animals have a keen sense of smell, the hunters would often actually smoke themselves out with a certain smell, so it disguises the human smell. So it's gonna be qatara. Qatara is when someone is completely covered in smoke. So tarakoha means completely covered, completely enveloped. They'll be covered completely with this dark smoke, and they will be darkened.
Mulana, I'm just, while you mentioned that, I'm thinking about, if you see these firefighters coming out of a fire and then generally have dust and this blackness on them. Could that also be trying to make you see the outcome, that this group of people will be going towards the fire in that sense?
And I think also that's a good visual for khabara, because the idea is that the people in the second group are those who are exposed to fire. And as Brother Sunir mentioned, is when you're exposed to fire, you're exposed to smoke, you're exposed to ash, and abundance of that actually causes the covering of dust. وجوه يومئذ عليها غبرة, and then ترهقها قطرة, they will be completely covered in this dark smoke, and they'll be completely darkened. So I think that's actually an excellent link in terms of why the ghabara, because of the link to the covering of the smoke. Let me ask a question quickly. Which group was mentioned first and which was second?
Those destined for Jannah first. For those who have bright faces. Yeah.
So in other words, first the saved, and then the people of Jahannam. In the previous surah, who was mentioned first? فإذا جاءت الطامة الكبرى يوم يتذكر الإنسان ما سأل وبرزت الجحيم لمن يرى فأما من طغى وآثر الحياة الدنيا فإن الجحيم المأوى وأما من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى. So what's the difference?
It's the other way around.
It's the other way around. So why swap the ways around in the surah? What about the surah makes it more appropriate to mention those who are saved first, as opposed to the previous surah?
I think in the beginning of the surah, Surah Abasa, Allah indicates to us by those first few verses who gets preference. So it's almost like in keeping with how the theme is going, where again He gives preference to the believers or those who are saved, which is like the same people, same group of people.
Good, excellent. So in other words, the surah opens with a believer. عبس وتولى أن جاءه الأعمى وما يدرك لعله يزكى أو يذكر فتنفعه ذكرى. So the surah opens with a believer because the focus of the surah is the honor of the believers. And then secondly, Allah speaks about أَمَّا مَنِ اسْتَغْنَى, as for those who were deemed themselves to be independent. And therefore, because of that focus on the believer, and that believer is mentioned first, therefore, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ مُسْفِرَةٌ. Whereas in the previous surah, what was the opening about? It was more about warning. You with me? It's warning about warning. After the opening qasam, Allah says, قُلُوبٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَاجِفَةٌ أَبْصَارُهَا خَاشِعَةٌ. What's أَبْصَارُهَا خَاشِعَةٌ? Eyes humble, downcast. يَقُولُونَ إِنَّا لَمَرْدُودُونَ فِي الْحَافِرَةِ. What is this again now? People saying, are we going to return to our former state? You understand? In other words, Allah presents the argument of the disbeliever first in the previous surah. And therefore Allah presents the consequence of the disbeliever first, and the believer second. Here in the surah, Allah presents the honor of the believer first, and therefore Allah presents the consequence of the believer first. So beautiful in terms of the attention to the sequences. And then Allah ends the surah with Ulaika humul kafaratul fajrah. Ulaika humul kafaratul fajrah. What does ulaika mean? Those. So in other words, when you speak those, you ulaika is what type of word? Ismul? Ismul what? هذا هذه ذلك تلك هؤلاء أولئك. اسم الإشارة. We did first here. اسم الإشارة. اسم الإشارة a demonstrative pronoun or demonstrative noun. اسم الإشارة means it's indicating towards something. So who is this اسم الإشارة indicating towards?
وجوه يومئذ عليها غبرة.
It will indicate towards the most recent mentioned group of people. Because when Allah mentions two groups of people, we have Ismul Ishara, it may be unclear who it's referring to, and therefore we go to the most recent one, and those are the ones who are وجوه يومئذ عليها غبرة ترهقها قترة أولئك, that group, those هم الكفرة الفجرة. What happens if I take the kafara just means the disbelievers. What if I take the hum away? أولئك الكفرة. How do you translate أولئك الكفرة? This first year work. هذا بيت هذا البيت. Irshad, Bismillah.
Are the believers?
So أولئك الكفرة. If you have a al, you don't have is or. Remember, that's the rule.
Those believers.
Those disbelievers.
Those disbelievers. In other words, when you have an al, how do you say those are disbelievers?
You remove the al.
Yes, in other words, if you want to say, oopsie, if you want to say, sorry, أولئك الكفرة. What do you say it means?
Those disbelievers.
It means those believers. And then I'm saying أولئك كفرة. What does that mean?
Those are disbelievers.
Those are disbelievers. So which one am I? Allah is not saying those disbelievers. Allah is not saying those are disbelievers. What is Allah saying? Allah is saying those are the disbelievers. So to do that, I have to add the whom in. You want me to separate between these two, so I don't say those disbelievers. So this, in other words, becomes what? It becomes a mubtada khabar construction. There's many ways to make i'rab of this. I won't go through all the ways. Or can I go through very quickly? And if you don't catch it, it's okay. So some ulama make the whom a fasl. In other words, you don't put a label on the whom. It's just called fasl. Then the ulaika becomes the mubtada and kafratu becomes the khabar. Some other ulama of Nahud say the whom is the mubtada and the kafratu is fajr. Kafratu is the khabar. Therefore, they are the disbelievers, and this whole thing becomes the khabar for this mubtada. So ulaika is the mubtada, and this whole jumlatul ismiya is the khabar. So there's two ways of making i'rab of it. The point I want to make is that Allah wants to say, or Allah is saying, ulaika, that group of people, they are al-kafaratu. What's kafara mean?
Believers, somebody who covers
Believers, but also kafara means what?
to cover.
Cover.
So we actually spoke about qatara, being covered in smoke, ghabara, being covered in dust. And you can see it's almost like Allah is speaking about a physical covering of dust and darkness and smoke in the next life. Allah is saying that they are the ones that are kafara, they are the ones that are covered from faith in this life. So the theme of covering continues is that they are spiritually covered now, and they will be physically covered in the year after, whereas the believers will be unveiled in the year after. It will be spiritually unveiled. So therefore, they will be physically covered in the next life. So kafara refers to your belief or action.
Belief.
It was to belief. So in other words, They are the ones that are the true disbelievers. And what's al-fajr?
Evildoers.
Evildoers. So what word do you know from fajr?
Fajr.
Fajr. So how is fajr linked to fajr? Fajr. What about water? Have you heard of water infijar? Water gushing forth is
burst
infijar.
forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, so what's the link?
I think the manner in which it's done. Fajr is like when the light tears through the night sky.
Good. And
So it's about
infijar,
action.
the water. Yes,
When it's
good.
gushing forth. So it's about how the action, it's like the adjectives of the actions in all cases. It's like a rebellious way of doing something.
Good. So it's something which is gushes for, something which almost like explodes forth. Like if you look at the morning sky when Fajr time has come, is now that the light has cracked open the darkness and is gushing forth. Infijar of water is when the water has cracked open the ground and is gushing forth. So Fajr is someone where they have a being, but what is cracked open and splitting forth is their sin. They're in a state of fujur. They're in a state of fujur. So the Fajr is a person who has a gushing forth of evilness. So in other words, kafara is linked to their belief, whereas Fajr is linked to their actions. And Allah is saying, Ulaika, those people whose faces are covered, whom they are the ones that are in belief, they are kafara, they are covered up spiritually, they deny the truth, well, and they are also Fajr. Fajr means that they are gushing forth in wrongdoing, in bad deeds, in evil. It is manifest from them. And also there's a link between the two, is that when people enter into faith, people also strive to leave the evil behind. They try to leave the evil behind because faith is that regulator of people's actions. Faith regulates your action because faith comes with divine guidance, and the divine guidance regulates people. So it strives to guide people away from a life of fujur, of becoming fajr. And that's going to be the end of the surah. May Allah Ta'ala give us the nur and the meaning of the surah, and accept our studying of it, accept your studying of the surah. Make the surah intercede for you on the day of Qiyamah. Make the surah weighty on your scale on the day of Qiyamah, that we may be of those who have these bright, illuminous faces, that we may be laughing and be filled with joy because we have all received the news of paradise. And may Allah Ta'ala protect us from the hellfire. Allahu Ameen. Please do try to read the surah. Please do try to memorize the surah. It's really don't. The Prophet says, "Man laysa fi jawfihi shay'un min al-Quran ka baytin kharibin." The person who doesn't have any Quran in their heart is like an abandoned house. So don't make your heart abandoned of the Quran. Fill your heart with these few verses, and these few verses. These are like the most important illumination that you can have in your life. Are these verses of the Quran? And in a world which is crazy and mad and distracted and materialistic and just focused on this dunya, you can get so lost into this world. Tie yourself to that which is infinite and eternal, which is the kalam of Allah Ta'ala, and make an effort to memorize and to study these few surahs that we have done with all your teachers now, and so it becomes part of what you know. And just take a blank mushaf without any English in and start reading and translating the surahs that we have done so far. So do you don't like after a while think, now what is now tarhaquha qatra? It's quick in your mind that the qatra, the dark smoke from that fire, is overwhelming them and it's darkening them, and tarhaqa means to cover completely. It's completely covering them. It must be vivid to you in your mind what these words mean, but that only comes with a bit of effort and a bit of striving, and then Allah will deepen your insights, inshallah. There's a knowledge that comes from your comes from learning, and there's knowledge that comes directly from Allah Ta'ala. And with time, inshallah, make dua, Allah will also teach us directly, with even beyond the asbab of learning. Allah will teach us directly and illuminate and inspire our hearts with true understanding and true knowledge. Allahu Ameen. Barakallah. Next week, inshallah, we'll start Takweer. But before Takweer, we'll do a quick breakdown of the sections of Abasa. So what the homework, inshallah, is please break down the sections of Abasa into the sections. Try to see what is related to what. Try to understand the theme pattern. Like, are the themes being repeated? Are the themes being mirrored? Understand the theme linkages, and then also start preparing Surah Takweer. At least try to prepare maybe the first like 6 or 7 verses, inshallah, short verses, 6 or 7 verses with translation, with tafsir as well for the next lesson, inshallah. Barakallah. May Allah bless and protect all of you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.